Earlier this month, all redevelopment agencies in California were dissolved, and the process of unwinding their financial affairs began. Given that California had about 400 redevelopment agencies, and collectively they owe tens of billions of dollars in terms of bonds and debts and other obligations, this unwinding process is going to be complicated. In our report, we describe the events that led to redevelopment agencies' dissolution, and then we also describe how this winding down process will work. Over 60 years ago, redevelopment in California was a small, locally financed program. Cities would use the program to rehabilitate sections in their community, in their downtown, that they consider to have urban blight. The redevelopment project areas seldom were very large. They seldom expanded more than about 12 city blocks. Over the years, though, for a variety of reasons, redevelopment expanded in California, and cities began to place more and more of their downtown, sometimes their entire downtown, under redevelopment. Sometimes the land that cities placed under redevelopment, few would consider to be urban blight by most people's understanding of that term. Redevelopment project areas began to be very large. In some cases, they expanded more than 30 square miles. Redevelopment's expansion meant that redevelopment agencies got some property taxes that would otherwise go to schools, community colleges, the city, the county, and special districts, all those other local agencies that serve that property area. Statewide, about 1 out of every $8 that California property owners paid were given to a redevelopment agency as opposed to these other local governments. So that began to place some fiscal pressure on these other local agencies. Redevelopment also placed some fiscal pressure on the state, because under state school financing laws, the state helps schools that don't receive enough local property taxes to provide their school programs. Statewide, redevelopment was estimated to cost the state over $2 billion a year. To put that number into some perspective, $2 billion is about what the state pays every year for the UC system, the University of California system, or for the California State University system. Over the course of 2011, there was considerable debate about the redevelopment program, about its benefits, about its successes, about its cost to local governments and cost to the state. Ultimately, the legislature passed and the governor signed a redevelopment reform bill. And in this bill, redevelopment is greatly reduced in scale, and the agencies are required to make annual payments to schools to offset their fiscal effect on schools. Now, the California Constitution includes a variety of provisions that restrict the state's ability to change local finance. And so the legislature and governor knew that there was a chance that this redevelopment reform bill could be overturned by the courts. And so the legislature and governor passed a second bill that said if the redevelopment reform measure were to be found to be unconstitutional, that this second law would take effect, ending redevelopment throughout California. So in December of 2011, when the California Supreme Court ruled that the redevelopment reform bill was unconstitutional, that action set in motion the dissolution of California redevelopment agencies throughout the state. In most communities, this unwinding redevelopment process is being managed by the same local officials and the same local staff that handled redevelopment before the dissolution. Except now, instead of creating new project areas, their charge is to wrap up and wind down the affairs of the redevelopment agency. Now, in some cases, there's going to be some difficult questions and difficult decisions to be made. What happens, say, for example, with a multi-stage project? Do you stop it immediately? Do you stop it after the second stage? Or do you go all the way through? These difficult decisions are going to be the responsibility of a local oversight board. And the oversight board is comprised of 7 members, and they're appointed by all the local governments that have been affected by redevelopment. So the school districts have an appointment, the community colleges, the city, the county, and the special districts. And these people will be making decisions regarding winding down the redevelopment agency's financial affairs. And just like a city council meeting or a county board of supervisors meetings, these meetings for the oversight board will be open to the public. The oversight board will continue until all the redevelopment agency's debts have been fully repaid. Prior to their dissolution, redevelopment agencies were receiving over $5 billion of property taxes a year. Some of these funds will be needed to pay the redevelopment agency's debts and to pay for projects that are currently under construction. These costs are likely to be in the range of about $3 to $4 billion a year. So that'll leave $1 to $2 billion available to distribute to the other local governments in the community. Over time, as the redevelopment agency's debts are retired, the funding that would be available to these other local governments will increase. Many redevelopment agencies also had some cash reserves, and that'll be distributed to the other local governments. And some also had land and buildings that over time can be sold, and the proceeds of those sales can be distributed to the other local governments as well. Our report concludes with a series of findings and some recommendations regarding the redevelopment dissolution process. We also highlight a series of key state and local decisions that will have a significant effect on how much local property taxes is distributed to schools and other local governments.